Hi everyone, I'm Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot, and today or tonight we're going to have a very fascinating discussion. It's a roundtable discussion with Clif High and Paladin and myself, and we're going to be talking about cryptocurrencies, sort of a hot topic for the days, and the future. So it's going to pretty much be a wide-ranging discussion, and I do encourage the people in the chat to formulate good questions and put them in all caps, if you don't mind, and that will help the discussion along so that we know what areas concern you and what areas you want to hear about. So I'm very pleased to have both Paladin and Clif High on my show tonight, and let me see if I can bring them on the screen. As it happens, Paladin does not use a camera. The reason for that is that he is a private investigator and he is not supposed to be showing his face, if I understand it correctly, and he can maybe clarify that. And I have these bios and they're on my website, so you can take a look at them. Clif High, of course, is the person who has a patent on what he calls, he is in charge of this web bot software project. And it looks like it was built, if I understand it, in 1997. It captures, I don't know if this is actually about that or not, but the web bot project has been going for quite a long time and has been predicting, in some ways it's a prediction of behavior software based on language that it gathers on the internet from humans, and maybe from AI as well. That's a question we're going to ask with regard to cryptocurrency as well. Paladin is a forensic financial investigator. He's a licensed PI, as I mentioned, and he is a key member of what is called the White Hats at whitehatsreport.com. There are other groups that call themselves White Hats, and so it's important not to make a confusion between the various groups, but this particular group, I believe, was one of the first to come out under that moniker. So anyway, welcome, guys. Say hello to everybody, listening.
Hello.
Okay, and Paladin? Hello?
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is, that's a very sketchy bio that I was giving there. So why don't we start with you, Clif, and why don't you give yourself a short introduction, describe the state of the WebBot now, and anything else you'd like to say about yourself before we get going.
Started the project in '93 conceptually. I had the first code running in '97. Took me a year to do the first data run. It's not patented. It's a proprietary mechanism. My patent is for the software called Vortex, which actually allows you to read up to 2,000 words per minute from computer screens. No longer supported or sold since they went to basically the 1080i high intensity radiation screens in about 2003 or so. Other than that, the current state of the project at the moment is that I'm no longer doing the Alta reports, and I'm concentrating the predictive linguistics power of the project entirely into cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are software I've been coding since 1979, so I understand this world, and the fit between the predictive linguistics and cryptocurrencies is very good, and has been for the past couple of years, as it's all sort of segueing in around particular kinds of emotionally intense language. The WebBot project, essentially, I aggregate vast numbers of words off the internet. They go into a thing I call the emotional reduction engine, and what it does is it assigns a numeric value to words in a particular context that relates to their emotionality that's in that language. And then we look for fuzzy set theory juxtapositions between certain descriptors, nouns, and that kind of thing, and very hot emotional words, such that we end up with a bubble of words that are related emotionally and temporally, from which we make predictions. And it's been going basically since '97, so this will be our 20th year of operation here. And it's a very exciting time with all the cryptocurrency stuff blowing out right now. I've been in Bitcoin since 2011. Read the white paper in 2009, almost wrote some mining software, got distracted by real life, popped back in, and have been in cryptos through the big crashes and so on. From my perspective, cryptocurrency is all about the death of the dollar and everything flowing into it. And then just as an aside, before we can even think about speaking about AI, it's got to be defined. We need to, you and I need to discuss just exactly what we're talking about there. And that's basically where I'm at. I'm just a guy who understands software pretty well, and happen to live long enough for that to be a useful talent at this point.
Okay, very good. What I wanted to ask you, Cliff, you know, I interviewed you a very long time ago, right when you kind of hit the scene, I think. And I think I was one of the first, actually. It was on my radio show, and I don't even know, a lot of those radio shows they disappeared off our server, very unfortunately. So I'm not sure if I still have it on my server or not. But if I do, it's on the Project Camelot website, so people can do a search under your name and maybe find it. But at any rate, I wanted to ask you is, didn't you have a partner in the early days? And do you still have a partner in this sort of web bot?
I had a fellow friend of mine by the name of George Ure, who was doing the PR for it, okay, and was releasing information from the project before I set up a website. I didn't know where it was going. I was messing around with it. I contacted him because he had a website on economics. My data sets were focused on economics. I made some predictions he found interesting, and for a while he was the face and the voice of it. Okay, this was a time when it was dangerous to be messing about in certain technologies. I did not know if my technology was in that category. And then 2001 comes along. The very first internet famous prediction I made was in June 2011 or 2001. And it said 85 days, within the next 85 days, we were going to have this occurrence, which turned out to be the attack on the Twin Towers and all of that manifestation, right? So it forecasted 85 days out. I actually thought it would happen early in July, but I had my numeric scale reversed in terms of time, and I didn't recognize that until it actually occurred. Then I went back and flopped the scale back the other way, and everything from that point on started to roll and line up a little bit better. George and I had a parting of the ways. He was unhappy with some of he wasn't doing any of the coding and had no influence that way. He was strictly doing all of the PR and was the front part of it. We had a parting of the ways in 2005, and it came down to this basically. He had this idea as an echo of the 1930s that we would go into a depression, and from that depression would spring a revitalized USA based around a new form of communications technology. That every time these things happen, he said, we always get into new kind of communications technology. And the problem was that the data sets agreed with it. And so we were simpatico on that point, but around 2005, there were the first hints of the beginning of digital currencies. This is before the white paper that was released that cured the double spend problem. It was released by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2009, I believe. Maybe it was 2008. So in those 3 years, George and I had a split over this, and he went to work with another project that was doing predictive kind of stuff based on dreams and prescient visions and so on. I don't know where that other project is. His thing was our positions were exacerbated when he hardened against cryptocurrencies, and he made famously a statement in 2013 that, after what was known as the Mt. Gox crash, that all the cryptocurrency exchanges would be failures and closed in 3 months. And at that point, I think Bitcoin had crashed down. I'm unsure of the exact number, but it crashed a huge amount, down to say $110 or something like that. And then it went flat for 2 years as the industry recovered from the Mt. Gox debacle. But even then, I knew that the data was continually saying this was it, this was it. And what George failed to recognize was Bitcoin is a communications technology. it's more than just a currency. It's all about the transaction and the communication between people and a trust in an environment where you can't trust anyone. And it removes trust from the equation. That's why cryptocurrencies are the perfect vehicle for now. And that's also why I know that we're not dealing with a government plot, you know, that kind of thing. All right, it's not a deep state trying to take over, although the deep state is trying to get in on it and may indeed have, well, the deep state did work on the hash algorithms, and some smart people took these hashing algorithms and used them inside Bitcoin. This is where we are today. So, you know, from $100 to it's over $7,000 at the moment.
Okay, I think this is an uninvited guest. Sorry about that. I actually have to lock the room. Not sure what's going on here. Paladin, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, there's something strange going on here. You know, par for the course. So
you forget to lock the door?
Well, yeah, sort of, but it's supposed to always be possible to lock and unlock it, and suddenly it's gone. So I don't know what's happening here.
Maybe someone doesn't want us talking about this.
Someone seems to have, this happened to me one other time. It looks like they took over the room. All right. At any rate, we're just going to I do have a means to kick people out if that happens. I don't know what's going on here. At any rate, thank you for that, Cliff. That's a very good explanation, and I appreciate that. Paladin, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself, to explain why you're not on camera, and just your bio is, as I said, on my projectcamelotportal.com website. But for those who don't know who you are, can you give yourself a short rundown?
Okay. I have a background in accounting and finance. I have a Bachelor of Science in Accounting, went into the corporate world for 5 years, realized that wasn't someplace that I wanted to be. So I went into private practice, became a private investigator, and have been for 30 years, licensed in 2 states, am recognized court expert for forensic accounting, have testified in court regarding those as an expert witness. I've done backgrounds on police officers. I've done a lot of financial fraud audits. A lot of them have to do with the trading programs, which is a subject I know Kerry likes to get into. Surveillance, asset searches, skip tracing, everything just about. In the financial world, frauds, embezzlement, stock manipulation, you know, various investigations regarding all kinds of fraud. I've worked for both the private sector, the public sector, government, law enforcement, have provided information to the feds, the IRS, CID, on a few cases that we were working collaterally, also with the FBI. Had an uncle in the FBI, know several CIA guys. So anyway, that's about all I want to say about all of that. I'm still active. I do investigations where I work undercover in various capacities, which is the main reason why I don't want to show my face.
Okay, very good. So at this time, the subject is cryptocurrencies. What I'd like to do is start out with talking about how you see it, because first of all, I'm going to give the floor to Cliff, because Cliff, you are sort of getting notorious for making, I guess, some kind of predictions or whatever. I'm not sure what you're calling it. Your sort of analysis of cryptocurrencies, giving people heads up on various things related to that. And so can you describe what it is you're doing at this time in a more exploratory way, but also if you can explain why is it you are putting your confidence in cryptocurrencies and how you see, this is rather long-winded, but how you see the future. So it's kind of gives you the floor for this area.
Sure. So let's start with the last part of that first, and the way I see the future for this is, and it's what gives me confidence, is the death of the dollar. Okay, the dollar has been in existence since 1913. It has maybe 1 cent left in purchasing power. Petrodollar is dying as it's abandoned all around the planet. Our provinces like Venezuela and all these others are going through chaos as the dollar that they were pegged to has lost its purchasing power. Their currencies are dying. So there's all this stuff in the world that tells me the dollar is dying. Up until about 2005, it seemed quite convincing that the way that the data was discussing everything, that we were going into a gold and silver world. That made no sense then, and still makes no sense, because in our since World War II, we've doubled our population. We've doubled the population globally since World War II, due entirely to debt, to the issuance of debt that made people feel a wealth effect, that made them go ahead and have kids now rather than delay, and so on. And so in this 7 billion plus person world, we can't exchange gold and silver coins. It's not feasible. And it also instantly destroys international trade, because trying to settle an international trade where you actually had to move metals is what makes pirates rich, and no one would take the risk. And then it gets you back into some kind of letters of marque or tradability, such as were evolved in the 1800s, which leads you back to yet another currency act and the approach to developing some kind of a currency where you don't have to put your gold and silver at risk. Plus, there's not enough gold to go around above ground officially in the mines or in the mints. And that would, I think there'd be 4 billion ounces of gold, and so 3 billion humans wouldn't have gold. Silver doesn't work because we need it as an industrial metal. And currency, there's difference between money and currency. And money is perhaps best defined as a store of wealth. Currency is best defined as an exchange of energy. And that energy could be wealth in this case. And so you can have, and money without currency does you no good, and currency without money isn't accepted. So it's got to serve both purposes, right? And so having vast quantities of money like King Midas leads to nothing. But yet you need to be able to distribute your wealth, your money, in a currency form that actually gains you something. And so seeing the dollar die, I even as early as year 2000, starting to run some of the data sets then, it was like, okay, things are going to get really wonky. It's going to be a hellacious world. We're really facing a Mad Max kind of a future. Our data sets as early as 2003, we're talking about $600 silver. And of course, at that time, I conceived of that as the very brief transition that would lead us into that Mad Max world. And so, because under those conditions where the dollar system fails and paper currencies have failed, look at Venezuela, magnify that over most of the Northern Hemisphere, absent Russia, and think of the chaos that kind of world is going to create. No more just-in-time delivery system, no more deliveries of any kind, because no one's accepting money or credit to do the work, to get the oil, to put it into a tanker, to put the goods on that tanker, to ship it over to you. And so something has to be there to lubricate all of this. If it's gold and silver, we're really screwed, because you can't move gold and silver fast enough. Plus, we've burned up most of the silver, so to speak, by putting it in cell phones, the monitors, the microphones, the cameras, and everything else we're using right at this moment. And so the gold and silver world was a very dire kind of as monetary, it was kind of a dire future. And so all through that period of time from 2003 until the manifestation of the network effect in Bitcoin in early 2013, we were looking at a very grim future. And then Satoshi Nakamoto released a white paper. It was debated for a year. People wrote code about it and started mining coins. Satoshi mined the Genesis block, the first coins out of the system. It was a brilliant idea, conceptualization of the whole thing. Other people bought on to the idea. They started going out and using Bitcoin and making more of them and this kind of thing. 2013, it got the network effect. I can tell this from my data. So I knew from 2013 onward that Bitcoin had what I called long legs that would go far into the future that we were allowed. Then around 2015, it became evident that Bitcoin and the altcoins, as they are called, the clones, the copies of Bitcoin, because it's software, write once, copy many is the rule in software. But in 2015, it became quite clear that here was a chance, okay? Here was a chance to avoid the Mad Max future. If things worked out, universe may have provided us, in my way of thinking, an opportunity to use software as currency and money, and merge the two in a way that had never ever existed before, and blend it with secure, trustless communication. And so I thought, okay, if we can get enough of the wealth out of the dollar system and into the cryptocurrency world before the dollar system goes bluey, we can make do for a while with the developing cryptocurrency world to replace the dollar world while we grow into the future. We don't have to go Mad Max. It means gold and silver have to be relegated to what they are, metals. Now, gold can still be used as a store of value, but we need silver even more now because we need to get more high tech, not less so. Because we're going to get more of these things going, connect more of these schemes together, these ideas, and we're going to need more silver to make more computers, et cetera, et cetera. So the $600 future for silver is still in the data, all based on the idea of silver as an industrial metal, not as monetary. So in pre-cryptocurrency world, the only way to conceive of silver was basically as a primary monetary metal, not primary industrial. But over the subsequent years, from 2008 onward, the role of silver within the emotional sets of the data has shifted to where all we really see anymore is its use as an industrial product. And it has some unique characteristics that way for all these really high-tech things that we haven't even seen yet. And so as more of the disclosure part of all of this comes out, we're going to see silver go rising in US dollar terms, but it will never catch the cryptocurrency world. It can't. The reason it can't is we have the largest possible amount of dollars this planet has ever seen. We're saturated with them. And the wealth that is represented there is so huge that it's going to be squeezed into something that could accommodate it, which is cryptos, because cryptocurrencies can grow and they can keep growing and they can double and they can fork. And we can just go on, and we can suck all of that wealth out of the dollar system and into something that's healthy. Now, so this is why I have confidence on it in terms of cryptocurrencies, because of its appearance when it appeared and what it does in the grand scheme of things. Now I have other confidence because I can read code. And so I see that there's, it's all open source. So you can't, there's like people running around saying, blah, 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 NSA has got a backdoor and they can come in and suck out all your coins. And it's like, bullshit, people. You can read this. This is open source code. There's no backdoor in there. Other people say, well, blah, blah, blah. They've got backdoors into the Windows machines. Yeah, sure they do. But big deal. None of the miners are running Windows machines. They're not running Windows OS. So the blockchain doesn't run on Windows, Windows boxes. And so there's all this stuff out there we call FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's being strewn around. But I have a great deal of confidence. I see this as the burgeoning breakout into sci-fi world, that we're going to have, floating cars and all of this kind of stuff in a few years, anti-gravity, all of that sort of thing. We need more silver for that. People will be selling their coins into the industrial machine that will use silver to make all of these cool devices and so on, as we try and dig ourselves out of the hole that the ruling elites have got us in from 400 years of abuse or 1,000 years of abuse of humanity. And the cryptocurrencies are really cool because they're trustless. They're engineered such that you don't have to trust anybody. The system is basically the trust you need to you put your trust into the code, into the cryptocurrency itself, and you don't have to worry about trust with someone else. Now, in terms of what I'm doing with the cryptos, because of the juxtaposition of my technology and the fact that the cryptos are software, basically, and because I understand where people talk about software, GitHub, Slack, all of these places, my data sets had sucked down all that data for a long time. And so my system of predictive linguistics was able to build very tightly congruent and coherent profiles of the words associated with certain specific kinds of cryptocurrencies. And so I was able to make some remarkably good prescient calls on the cryptos. So at one point, I think it was in like maybe March or something, it was probably it seems like forever because in crypto world time is compressed, but it's probably only like March of 2016, maybe it's 2015. My data sets told me about this weird little thing that Bitcoin was going to do. It was going to go up through $408, and it had been, when it told me this stuff, Bitcoin was around $200, maybe $225, something like that. Nobody was paying attention to it. And so along comes the data and says it's going to go up to 408, and it's going to do this weird looping between 408 and 428. It's going to do it 3 times, and then it'll be done with that and move on. And so I knew that whenever this certain pattern would appear, there we would go. And it didn't really give me some hints as to the time frame that would occur in. I was off by about 40 or 50 days. So it took a little bit longer than I'd anticipated. But sure enough, Bitcoin did this loop between 408 and 428. And from that point on, I was able to really zero in on, because of my system includes and is based upon a backward refining of the data. So in other words, I make a forecast. It's going to do X, Y, and Z. If it does it and that language appears, I can then go calculate the time from the data showing up until the time within my system, and then the time that the language actually showed up, and adjust my ability to make predictions as the lexicon is tuned, so to speak, relative to time. So that's what I was able to do. And then the next set of predictions led to something almost as spectacular. And then we've had some pretty good predictions on Bitcoin since then. And so here we are. The latest and greatest couple of predictions are that we should see 10,000 before the end of the year. That's a no-brainer. And we should see 13,880 by the end of February. And then we blow out, and then we really get moving, because the larger scheme of things is that more money piles into cryptocurrencies. Now, here's the thing about all of this. This is an interesting world we're living in, because cryptocurrencies are described as virtual currencies. To people who are in the trade, what's important is the cryptography. That's why we call them cryptos. But it's also software. Software goes through systems of a particular type of adoption, particular rate of adoption. It's quantifiable. You can slice and dice it any number of ways. Lots of professors have got tenure based on doing analysis on how software and new things go in through different cultures. And if we look at the planet as a whole, and we can see this with cell phones. And cell phones were early adopter. I had one in the 80s, and I had to lug along a battery pack for it. And I was an innovator, and it was because I required it for my business, because the people I worked for, Microsoft and this kind of thing, wanted to be able to talk to me while I was in the car. A staggering idea. Nowadays, of course, everybody's got a phone, but there was a particular point at which all of a sudden, the 1 to 3% of the innovators, all of a sudden it started getting into mainstream. And then it was like there were just, Apple arose and the iPhones, and the rate of sales just started really escalating until it plateaued off. And what occurred was, the humanity was basically adopting the technology, and we went from innovators to early adopters to mainstream. Well, right now, in my way of thinking, we're about to cross the point from innovators into early adopters of cryptocurrencies. So basically, it's kind of like saying, you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait until we get it to March of next year, when the dollar has taken a couple of more precipitous hits, things are a lot more chaotic, and people will be fleeing to cryptocurrencies for safety. And the reason you can do that is that you can put gold in your pocket, but can you get a pocket full of gold through the TSA? No. But I could put gold into Bitcoin. I could then put Bitcoin in a wallet, memorize the addresses and everything of the wallet, destroy the PC and the hard drive, get on a plane, because TSA isn't going to be able to see the numbers in my head, and then I could fly anywhere I wanted to, land, download another one of those wallets, put that number in there, and reconstitute my Bitcoin, because it doesn't go anywhere. It stays on the blockchain. And the blockchain, I can get into the technical stuff if you really care to know about what the blockchain is and that kind of thing. But
okay, well, at this point, what I'd like to do, this is great, Clif, and it's great, like a short sort of history of all of it. and your own sort of actions within there. But what I want to do is give Paladin a chance to sort of do the same thing you're doing here from his own point of view. And I do want to say, as sort of, I guess, before anything else goes on, I just want to say that these that we do have differing opinions here, and that's why this is going to be an interesting show. We're not all on the same page. I'm certainly very interested in the crypto, and I have a lot of very specific questions that I want to get to, but we're not. I want to, you know, give each of you a chance to bring your sort of points of view forward. So, do you feel that you kind of have said enough here that we can give Paladin a chance to step up and bring his own point of view, which is going to be, I think, somewhat different, and see where we go from here, and then we'll really dig in a lot more. So, Paladin, are you there, and do you want to step forward?
Sure. Thanks for that, Cliff. Every time you talk about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and everything, I get an education. So, and you know, interestingly, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago, Kerry, we did a interview on Bitcoin, and you know, at that, I mean, I don't remember everything I said, but I know at that point I was kind of excited about it, only because it was a challenge to the powers that be. And anything that's a challenge to them is, you know, in my mind, a good thing. So having said all that, you know, there's a lot of things about this that I have, I don't know if I want to say issues, but I'm a little concerned that at some point in time, the powers that be, the banking cartel, if you will, that's probably who this threatens the most, although it does filter down to other levels. But I think the banking cartel is going to take steps to either curtail this, crash it, or I don't know if they're going to take it over. I'm not sure if there's
they're buying, sorry to dispute that, but they're buying it right now. They've got their own coin called Ripple XRP. They've been teaching each other about blockchain for about 3 years.
Okay, I appreciate that, Cliff, and absolutely that's correct. But what I want to do is just give Paladin the floor for a while before you, you know, because he's going to say a lot of things that you're going to take issue with, I imagine. I'm just guessing. And I think I could probably say some things you'd probably take issue with as well. I'm also got, you know, like I say, lots of questions. So I'm going to give you a chance. Don't worry. You know, you're each going to get your turn to sort of say your piece, and then we're going to move on from there, and we're going to dig down deeper. So Paladin, do you want to continue with, you know?
Sure. So I guess I take a sort of a macro or a general view of this, and I see that it is a direct attack on the banking cartel. And I'm more familiar than I'd like to be on what their tactics are and how they work and what they're willing to do to keep their control over the financial system, which they've had for hundreds of years. So I guess I don't see them sort of going away very easily, very quickly, or anytime soon. So there's a few things. I mean, I guess I can see where regulations, they can regulate this out to a certain degree by taking various steps. You know, I guess anything like this, and they're gonna, by regulations, I'm talking about they can do their tax thing. They can say, you know, they can use any kind of reason they want, money laundering, fraud, we're not collecting enough taxes, and all these kinds of things. In addition to, they're not able to collect their fees like they can when they use, you know, when we use their services in the bank. And they also, you know, we put our money in the bank and they loan it out 10 times and they make money off of it and all those kinds of things. So there's a lot of reasons why they wouldn't want this to come into play. And I just wonder, you know, what kind of safeguards Bitcoin or the cryptocurrencies in general have built into them. And I understand there are, I don't know, something like 1,000 or 1,100 different cryptocurrencies. I'm not sure about that, but I guess there's a lot more than what I thought. As I understand it, the blockchain technology is solid. And, you know, that's one area that I see going into the future that can do, and I think you mentioned this earlier, Cliff, that it can do a lot of things besides just the cryptocurrencies. I also think it's interesting. I looked this up. I looked up the tax code, and the IRS tax code, so not surprisingly, does not treat cryptos, the currencies, as actual currencies. They basically treat them as I think the word is product. I think essentially means they're treating them as a security, like a stock. So that tells me that sometime down the road, they're going to do something to get them out of the picture. You know, I don't know what, but there's several ways that they can do this through regulations. Also, there's a question that I guess I can throw back to Cliff. Well, I have a lot of questions. Let's start with the easy ones. How many people are involved in the cryptocurrencies, if you know, Cliff?
You mean in general across the planet?
Yeah.
I don't know. It would be very difficult to say. I would estimate probably in the millions.
Okay.
And, you know, there's probably millions in the U.S. and maybe tens of millions in China. It's a little opaque. You name a country, I can give you some estimation of where the cryptos are hot in that country and this sort of thing because of my role. But let's examine a few of your points here, okay? I don't think government's going to shut it down. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, but before we do that, Paladin, you know, I just want to say that if you have anything else to say, you should sort of say it. And if not, then we're going to move on, because I have a number of questions that I want to expand upon. And Cliff talked for quite a while. Do you have issues with anything he said? I do want to say that because I know you, and I also know my own contacts, that you are getting some back channel information saying there's no way. In fact, this is not conjecture. This is information you're getting that's direct, that is saying that they are going to interfere with it. It's just a matter of how. And then the question becomes, how can they? And I think you also have to divide out certain parts of this idea of crypto, because there is the blockchain. There's also IOTA, which is the Internet of Things, is kind of where it comes from. But there's I don't even know what you call it, but IOTA is like a coin, and that it doesn't use the same technology as blockchain. So there are a couple of what you call currencies or coins or whatever you want to call them that are posing possible counter moves, if you will, to the blockchain technology, from my understanding. And I've been trying to obviously educate myself on a lot of this stuff. And I think it's quite fascinating what the whole sector is yielding. Then we are going to get into the artificial intelligence. What does it mean? And I just listened to somebody who talked specifically with regard to Ethereum and how that somehow is an open door for being modified and or interacting with artificial intelligence, and that being a certain kind of, and Cliff, I appreciate your desire to define our terms, and we can do that. But so these are the directions we're going to go. We have, limited time, as I appreciate. I hope you appreciate that. And we also have people that are probably going to want to ask some good questions in the chat. So Paladin, I need you to either finish what you're going to say or say what you have to say, because this is your chance to kind of lay out your position if you have one. And
okay,
not for you to question Cliff, but for you to make statements of your own, assuming you've done your own research in this area.
Well, I have done some research, not near as much. I can't catch up in a week or two. So, I mean, I've done what I can. I just, my overall feeling is that they're going to, this is direct competition with the powers that be. The powers that be, their power comes from their ability to control the financial system, because we all need money to survive, to pay bills, to eat, everything. So that is where their power derives from. And so cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the ones that are out there are a direct shot at their power. And so they're not going to sit back and let it happen without doing something. So I can start there. As I go through and do research to see how they treat it from a tax standpoint, they don't treat it as a currency. They specifically say it's not a currency when in actuality it is. So that tells me that they're going to do something at some point in time. My questions that I had for Clif were to get an idea of where we are on the timeline as far as how much longer it's going to take before the cryptocurrencies are win, I guess, because I think that's what Clif is saying. And what I'm trying to do is get an idea of how long it's going to be before they win, because that tells me how long the bad guys have to essentially screw up the deal or take control of it or torch it. So because
okay, I also want you to address what is in essence the BRICS position on this, because the BRICS were posing quite a substantial counter to the dollar, and Clif's premise is that that this is coming around just as the dollar is obviously going, you know, south. And so in other words, there is also the role of the Vatican and various other bodies out there that may or may not want to get involved. Now, we already know, and let me just say this, we do know, and Paladin, you and I have discussed this, and so you know that the government, or whatever you want to call that, there's a similar phenomenon going on, I think, or a possibility for that phenomena, which has to do with what Microsoft did in the early days, basically of the sort of tech boom, which is eventually they hoovered up all the small companies, took them over, and then put their own brand name on it. So in essence, they don't necessarily want to kill it, they'll just take it over. And they're already invested in, I forget the name of it, but there's a couple coins, and there's also some kind of mining operation in Texas, a data mining operation, if I understand it correctly, that they're already involved in, and it's got a name, and I don't remember the initials for it. Maybe Clif knows. But so we do know that they're not, it's not like they're not going to work with these, this sort of, in this sector, this crypto sector. I think there's reason to know already that they're definitely going to get involved, and they're probably getting involved in a bigger and bigger way all the time. The question is, do they take it over the way they're used to doing, in a sort of monopoly way, the way YouTube has taken over sort of the video scene, and so on. In other words, that's the normal way that they sort of make their presence known. So they make it cheaper, easier, and better and faster for you to deal with them. Now, there are some problems with cashing out of your coins. From what I understand, the technology is fairly slow, and this is where IOTA comes in.
No. Sorry, Kerry, that's wrong. IOTA is an Internet of Things. It runs on a blockchain. The idea is it's a clone of basically the Ethereum blockchain. Ethereum allows their blockchain to be cloned. Let's stop for a second. Let me describe the landscape, okay? Let's consider this into basic two categories: coins and tokens. Coins are currency and money that run on a blockchain. The blockchain is the train rails. The coins are the train, or what the train carries. And so it's just the blockchain is just simply a communication vehicle. It's a little bit of code that runs on all of these servers that operates to keep and all coins, all cryptos are a transaction. They're a ledger. It's nothing more than, and this is why Paladin should really get behind this, go and read the specifications for what Bitcoin actually is, and you'll discover it's nothing more than a distributed ledger that uses a consensus pattern across a network to ensure you don't need trust, to ensure that the miners are there constantly trying to make a crypto, make a Satoshi by mining faster. And what we're after is consensus. And so all of these guys always have to agree on who has that amount of coins in order for this system to work. It does work. Going to Paladin's question, we've passed the point of no return. That occurred in early 2016. Cryptocurrencies have already won. We're in a hyperinflation situation very similar to the 1920s in Germany. That's why Bitcoin is now $7,000. It's not that Bitcoin is worth any more than it was when it first came out. It's that the dollar is worth so much less. If you bought $1 worth of Bitcoin back when Bitcoin came out, that might have given you 10,000 coins and you'd be a multimillionaire now. Not because Bitcoin is any scarcer. We've actually made a number of them. but it has a finite limit and a finite way of making itself such that there's no inflation of Bitcoin allowed past 21 million coins by the algorithm. The algorithms and stuff are all open source. They all work with us. I dispute that AI exists. It's a marketing slogan where companies say AI and they're really talking about a thing called an expert system. I've written expert systems. That's what all of this software was called in the 70s, where you take the knowledge out of a diagnostician or a doctor and you put it into a whole bunch of if then, this then, this then, this then, or else that kind of statements. And it just runs so fast that you think that it's actually sort of thinking if you're not really paying attention to what's going on. So AI as such doesn't exist. It's not that like any software is out there running on its own, can alter its own code or any of that business and alter Bitcoin. So the landscape is that we've got coins. That would be these networks: Bitcoin's blockchain, Ethereum blockchain, Litecoin, Monero, Cloak, and a few of these others. Then there's about 2,500 tokens. Tokens are exchangeable products that can be exchanged for coins. Tokens represent an investment in a specific company. So a specific company might be devising a way to spend your cryptocurrencies using a credit card, because that's what everybody understands is swipe it to pay for it, wave it at the machine to pay for it. So why should cryptos be any different? And so in fact, people make a way of making plastic cards that you can spend your cryptos. They need some funding to develop the software, get the machines made, stamp all the cards and so on. So they have what's known as an ICO, initial coin offering. And that is the functional equivalent of an IPO, which is what the banks used to do. So already cryptos have eaten banks' lunch. They've taken the IPO market away from the banks, but the banks can't care so much anymore because the dollar is dying. Their costs were so high that nothing was working. The whole stock market system is basically just being held there static while we try and get some money out of it and put it into the crypto world. So there is no alternative to cryptocurrencies absent a gold and silver Mad Max world. The bankers all know this. If you happen to pay attention to personnel records, you'll see bankers in this middle tier of management deserting banks like mad to go off and form crypto companies because they know where the future is. So there's a for sure sign that the system is not going to be regulated to death, overhauled, and it can't be overtaken. It can't be taken over because it's distributed. That's the whole beauty of this system. You can go out and find some miners in China, arrest them, shoot them, and harvest their livers, but the crypto mines will appear in Jamaica or in Indonesia because there's an economic incentive for people to mine cryptos. And so a crypto mine is just a computer that runs a node on the network, and it processes this distributed ledger and reconciles it with all the other computers. And it says, hooray, I did it faster than all the other computers. I get the reward. But in doing so, it reconciles that ledger and maintains its integrity so that we don't have to trust this. And because it's decentralized, because it's distributed, it's like the internet itself. You can't kill it. And so basically what we're looking at is a continuation of your favorite subject, UFOs, okay? As bizarre as this may sound, what we're involved in right now, you and I, this discussion among the three of us and what we're discussing directly stems from what occurred in 1947. Because when that spaceship crashed or was brought down, those technologies that they took out of it, fiber optics, 3D printing, mutable metals, all different kinds of software creations, all of that stuff has now been integrated into our society. Transistors, integrated circuit chips, computers, all of that stuff. My whole life, I've been working on the humanized version of alien technology. Now we've taken that step thing one more leap, and that is that we humans invented this kind of software, and now we're taking software and we're making software our money and our currency. But it all stems back to 1947 when we went from analog into digital. And this is like the culmination of it. Just at the point where they're starting to release real alien technology in the back channels. And so the people that are doing that, the deep state, they don't give a fig about the bankers. If the bankers get in the way, they just kill them. They don't care about them. What they care about is the perpetuation of humanity, and they know that our solution now is cryptocurrencies. And that's why it's getting the tacit approval that it has. If they wanted to shut down cryptocurrencies, they would have done it in 2011. Okay, when cryptos first started trading, they would have capitalized on it in a serious way in 2013. They could easily say it's money laundering and shut down all the exchanges in the United States overnight. In fact, many of those exchanges won't work in Washington state because Washington state imposes too much of a reporting burden on them. And yes, there's 2,500 cryptocurrencies now. They're in the general sense. Most of them are tokens. Most of those are individual companies inventing new technology, like the ability to spend your cryptos on a credit card or any number of things. And you're making an investment in this ICO into an individual company. There are the currencies that you can buy, and those currencies are appreciating in dollar value because the dollar is dying and because their technical worth in the world is escalating as more and more companies get on the crypto bandwagon and start getting the efficiencies of these distributed systems. Because the distributed and decentralized system is so much more efficient than the old hierarchical manner in which we used to do business, we're flopping our entire social order out of the pyramidical hierarchical form into a flattened distributed mechanism for all of us to live in, just as we're going into the age of Aquarius, and it's all working. And yes, the bankers and all these people are throwing fits, but we're actually beating them. Every time something comes up, there's a new workaround, there's software, it's flexible, and software has eaten money in a conceptual sense. And at this stage, the bankers, the smart ones, are bailing on the banks, bailing on all of it, and trying to start their own cryptocurrency companies and do this sort of thing. So now in March of next year, my data says we'll have 10,000 tokens out there. And then maybe by the end of next year, we might have 400,000 tokens out there, different kinds of different companies needing investments. I've been doing interviews with a bunch of these companies that are doing ICOs. Because I understand software, I understand the blockchain, I know it's not useful for doing things like acting as a streaming source. It just does not make any sense to use the blockchain that way. But I'm able to go on in because I'm seeing a lot of stuff and making a valid recommendation or do an interview and pull out information on this. And so I've been talking to people in Russia, been talking to people in South Africa, all of this kind of thing about their various different approaches to using the blockchain. So it's global, it's already succeeded. Also, any banker worth anything only has to look south to Venezuela and say, if we don't do something, that's the United States in 2 years. And right now, the only thing keeping Venezuela going is people doing Bitcoin mining. And you can do Bitcoin mining, albeit inefficiently, on some really old, ancient, creaky equipment if you have to. So it's just kind of a different world here. Now, when you start talking cryptocurrencies and you say things like IOTA is the Internet of Things. It's not really functional. It's not really doing anything.
No, actually, Cliff, I don't know if you really know what IOTA is, because I'm not saying IoT, I'm saying IOTA. It's
sure,
a
that's
certain
the stock
kind of
for Internet of, yeah.
It's
and
not.
It's a cryptocurrency.
It is not blockchain technology. I've listened to lectures by techies, and they insist that it is not the same as blockchain.
It's a distributed ledger technology that uses a different consensus algorithm.
Right.
And just like you'll hear the word hash graph. Hash graph is going to be the next Bitcoin, next blockchain.
They're having problems with people trying to get out of their cryptos. From what I understand, there is some kind of a slowdown because they don't have, this is what IOTA is trying to address. And it is more distributive from what I understand. And you know, I'm just saying that
but it's just one of the 2,500
who runs the company.
It's a company.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a certain one.
Right. And there's like, I get a dozen requests to do interviews with CEOs a day. And so I hear all the time, here Skycoin says they've got the original Satoshi vision re-engineered and they're faster and better than Bitcoin. Hashgraph says we're the next thing, we're going to take the load off, etc. And Bitcoin is slow, it's clunky. We're having forks on it all the time. Software is going to be re-engineered and so on. IOTA may not exist in a year. They may fail to cross that biological barrier of making a good business model out of their ideas. I think actually maybe 80% of all of the cryptocurrencies, crypto tokens that are out there now will come under pressure over this next year, and we may indeed see quite a few of them crash out. And it has nothing to do with anybody trying to shut them down or any of that. It has to do with just natural business cycles.
Okay, are you familiar with the moves the government is making, though, to get into, there's one that starts with a Z, I think, that they've gotten into in a big way.
Zcash and some of these others?
No, it's something else, something like Zircon.
Okay, well, there's 2,500 of them, so it's hard to keep track of them.
I'm sorry.
But also to that effect, in the United States, they're treated as a capital gains investment. You can report a loss if you take a loss when you sell. You can report a gain if you take a gain. You have to pay 50% or whatever your capital gains is on that particular item. There's the reinvestment. So they're treating it as though it was any other form of an equity or a security. Now, the security industries are dying. I don't know if you've noticed, but there used to be some 40,000 analysts employed in the banking world that did analysis of companies trying to do new IPOs and stuff. They fired almost all of that 40,000 cadre. No one read their reports. They were useless. The stock market kept going up anyway. And so 40,000 bankers were moved out. So the whole system of the whole idea of a monolithic banker cabal that's going to destroy us all and take over this whole thing is pretty ludicrous. And plus, bear in mind, from my perspective, this is part of disclosure. And the deep state buried in the holes in the ground in Area 51, they're not going to let the banks get in their way. They've got an agenda here. Now, my agenda is I want to live a long time, and I don't want to live in a Mad Max world. So I'm all for the cryptos and their approach to this, because I know they're cutting the bankers off at the knees.
Well, I
because
think
you can't control them.
I mean, let me just say that I think it would be superficial to think that we're not all on that page. Everyone wants to see, the people able to benefit and to move ahead and have a more abundant lifestyle, let's say, without having such a top-down society. So I think we can agree on that. What I'd like to do is, Paladin, you've heard a lot of talk back and forth here. You've been rather quiet. So do you have anything to add to what you've heard here in terms of your understanding and or your experience in the back end as an investigator in this very deep financial situation?
Okay, well, first of all, I think that, the original plan by the bankers, and, I would strongly assert that they run things, okay? I mean, from a human level, the ET level might be different, but they are basically running the earth, the bankers do. Because if we're on a debt system almost everywhere, so that gets everyone in debt. The countries are in debt. So, and I think we all know, anybody that's financially savvy know that the dollar is not going to last forever. It never does. And I don't think it was designed to. I think their original plan was to crash it and form the one world government, the one world currency. And they had all kinds of reasons to do that. The problem, reaction, solution scenario was going into play. They were going to split the U.S. or the world into 7 geographic unions, like the European Union, the North American Union, the South American Union, and there were 2 or 3 others. And they were going to get that model in play, and then they were going to merge them all together. And in the meantime, they were going to crash the dollar. They were going to crash all the other currencies, take all the currencies down with them, because the dollar is the reserve currency. And if you crash that, you crash them all, essentially. So at some point in time, the Chinese saw what was going on and said, you know what, we're going to take over running the financial world. Now there's, mixed feelings about whether they're working with the old European bloodlines or whether they're doing this on their own. But, it's common knowledge that they're accumulating gold. They want to go to an asset-backed currency. So that's what's going on, on the surface. The cryptocurrencies, I think, have come in at an interesting time because, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have a lot of characteristics that the current system does. And I think we're all aware that they want to go to a cashless society for a lot of reasons that strengthens their control. One thing around the cryptos that bothers me is that they are a form of a cashless situation. So that's a little concerning. They aren't backed by anything like our fiat currency. And the one thing that sort of bothers me about this, from a pure currency or exchange medium of exchange standpoint is that Bitcoin is going up. And so if people are investing in Bitcoin for the upside, they're not using it for transactions. I think that part, Cliff, is kind of what bothers me, only from the standpoint that if they're going to accomplish what you feel it's a fait accompli, I think is what I'm hearing you say, then it would be better that they were using the currencies to transact commerce rather than use it as an investment, because if you use it as an investment, then there's not as much activity from a commerce standpoint as what there could be. So that part kind of concerns me as we go forward, because it's going to draw investments. It's going to draw, investors. It's going to draw money.
Maybe Cliff, if you don't mind muting yourself while Paladin is talking. I don't know where that sound is coming from. I was muted. Paladin, if you're rubbing up against the mic or hitting the mic in some form or fashion, that's also causing a scratching sound. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
So I will mute myself again. So continue, please.
Okay. So that's a part, Cliff, that sort of, bothers me, because I'm sort of a purist in the medium of exchange situation, and I would love to see, and that's what my talk with Kerry 2 or 3 years ago was about when we were talking about Bitcoins, because it was a medium of exchange is really what we need. If the cryptocurrencies go into this investment and it has this investment feature, if you will, then a lot of money is going to come in there, but a lot of money is not going to come out, because people are going to park their money in there, checking a Bitcoin price every day, just like they check the stock market. And a lot of money, you're right, a lot of money has gone into the stock market in the last 8 years. And that's principally because the interest rates, you can't get a good interest rate. I mean, if you want to go buy a 2 years, 3 year CD, what do you get? 2%, 1%? I mean, it's been ridiculous. So that has caused all the money to go in the stock market. And I mean, let's be honest, they did that by design. It was a design to get the money into the stock market. I was raised on, you look for PE ratios about 8 or 10. And now you hear analysts tell you that, a 25 or 30% or 30 ratio is great. And you should sit here and you shake your head. You think they're crazy. So these are some of the problems that I see. Another one is that when we are able to go to the grocery store, when we're able to pay our car payments, when we're able to pay our mortgage payments, when we're able to pay our utilities with cryptocurrencies, then they will be here. And the last one is when we are able to pay our taxes, because the IRS will not accept cryptocurrencies to pay your taxes. So in that one funneling mechanism, if you will have to take your cryptos. If you're all into cryptos, you're going to have to take it into dollars to pay the IRS. So anyway, those are some of my concerns. And my question, I was going to kind of start down the road, Cliff, with where are we in that evolutionary process? Are we 10% there? Are we 20% there? As far as all because as I see it, we need every single merchant out there needs to be taking cryptocurrency of some point. And that to me is when we win, because if you still have to click back and forth between the dollar and the cryptos, or the Japanese yen and the cryptos, or the euros or the cryptos, there's still a crossover there that you're going to have to perform to kind of get back into the accepted world. And as long as that's in play, they can catch you, they can catch you going and coming, which leaves, I guess, in my opinion, some holes where they can exploit those until the cryptos basically, own the game. So I'll shut up now and let you address those.
First off, we can eliminate the last points by just noting that Amazon, the largest retailer on the planet, has already registered 3 crypto-specific domains. So they're going to start taking cryptos, so you'll be able to buy stuff on Amazon with them. I can go right now to 4 or 5 places in Olympia and use Litecoin to buy cannabis products because it's traded and used in the cannabis retail markets. Also, there's several convenience stores that'll take Litecoin or Ethereum. I can purchase cryptocurrencies at a little kiosk, a little ATM kiosk in my pot store. So I don't even have to involve myself with an exchange. I can get on their system, buy it right there, give them dollars, and then it'll put it on my phone and I can walk around, or I can use it there to spend. So I can spend cryptos right now. I happen to have torn this particular young man named Sam Sharma. I did an interview which I took off YouTube because it was so brutal, and I took an hour and a half and took him to task for not having his shit together when he was doing an ICO. But the fact of the matter is the company's turned around, and that's Centra, and they're one of the pay kind of cards. So you can spend cryptos now, and they'll accept a bunch of cryptos, and they'll put them in a vault, and they'll allow you to spend those cryptos on your credit card as you want to. You are correct about Bitcoin. Bitcoin has become the gold standard. It is now the repository for wealth, and that's good. We need a wealth repository. And yes, it was intended to be a freeing technology for cryptos. It didn't evolve that, or for the planet, it didn't evolve that way. It evolved out as the storehouse of value. So Bitcoin, I expect to go into the hundreds of thousands over the years, hundreds of thousands of dollars, not because Bitcoin's more valuable, but because the dollar is dying faster and faster and it's hyperinflationary. Now, Bitcoin will be perceived in value because here's where we're at. You ask it about a percentage. I say we're about to leave the 3rd percentile and go into this little cohort that is 4th through the 10th. And what I'm talking about is rate of adoption. I think that about 3% of the financially savvy people on the planet are involved in cryptocurrencies. That, if we'll note, was all it took for there to be a forceful, bloody revolution in the United States, what we can now call the United States, against the British, was 3% of the population that said it's going to be so. It shall be so. We will have it no other way. And that 3% is the critical factor for revolutions. It took about 2.5% because conditions were so bad to initiate the French Revolution. And then it caught on by wildfire. It was the same adoption curve that we see with cell phones, where you got 100 people, then you got 500,000, and then you've got 1 million people, and then the next thing you know, you're getting 500,000 people a month getting cell phones and smartphones, and the next thing you know, that in 1 year we do 500 million cell phones out the door. If we're adopting technology as a species, to deny that is basically shunt you off into the world of dinosaurs and obsolescence. And so it's really easy technology to understand. If you take the time to look at it, you don't get confused about all of the technological words involved. But the blockchain is absurdly simple to understand, as is Bitcoin and all of the individual coins. So it's a really terrible world out there. People are trying to rip you off. They're trying to steal your money in the form of these coins because they're escalating in value and they're valuable now. It's an adult world. It's a real wild, wild west world. There is no one out there guarding you. If you make a mistake in an address, you can send Bitcoin off to an address that doesn't exist and it's gone forever. And so you can make mistakes. It demands that you be an adult about things and be self-educating. The cryptocurrencies, though, are also totally freeing. It's a revolution at that level. It's a lot of people, because, and I take some pride in this, because of my ability to suss out some of these indicators in the predictive linguistics. A lot of people have sent me emails saying, hey, you know, I'm a millionaire now because I listened to you back in 2013 and started getting into Bitcoin when it had crashed down to 100, and these kind of things. So it's really a situation of where having that historical understanding of where we were at, trying to fit these things together with my predictive linguistics, has benefited a large number of people. I don't know how many people it has so benefited, because I get tons of emails to that effect, and I got to do work, so I put a lot of them off to the side. But I get people saying, hey, look, I just bought, you know, a brand new yacht because of this. Well, I'm kind of pleased, because it means a yacht builder somewhere now has to replace that yacht. So some shipbuilders like I was in my youth get work. And so it's already starting to filter out. You can spend these things all over. And true, you cannot spend directly cryptos for taxes, but that will change very rapidly with the death of the dollar over 2018. where we're going to have terrible kinds of problems. IRS is really, IRS is registered and does a lot of business out of Puerto Rico. IRS isn't working too well at the moment because of what happened to Puerto Rico. And so we're in an interesting situation where our social order is rapidly evolving and is being taken over by this technology. I think it is a good thing because I find it to be a freeing technology. Unlike a lot of other people, because I came up in software and have stuck it out and do software all the time, I'm not old to the point where I'm shying away from this. And I'm rather fortunate because other people that are also old in their 60s and 70s have been able to look at this and say, hey, well, if that old bald fart can do it, I can do it too. I'll go check this out. And so a lot of them are getting out of the systems that were crushing their retirement and giving them some hope for the future. People buying Bitcoins to put aside for their kids and for their grandkids, because they know that this is generational wealth transfer that's going on at the moment. And if you look at it that way and look at it at a historical perspective, it's a cool time to be here with this technology. And true, it's more Wild West than you can imagine. I mean, I could tell you stories that would just freeze your innards in terms of the fear that and the problems that people are having dealing with some of the issues of the technologies, and theft and phishing scams and Ponzi schemes and all kinds of fakery and fuddery and fraud. But at the same time, once you're burned that way, you're educated. And once you've lost money, and so this is the way that adults learn, is by making mistakes and getting slapped in the head kind of thing, right? And so it's a good time to make it, because if you make a mistake, you can come back even quicker, because we're at such a nascent area. There's only 3% of the financially aware people of the planet that are discussing this, okay? So you guys are right on the cusp of going into the early adopters. And I was part of a project that took technology into an organization that had 100,000 people working for them. And we saw people quit rather than deal with computers. But I was also there to be able to see what happens when it goes from innovators to early adopters. And then it's like, within a real rapid period of time, it starts hitting the early mainstream. Well, the early mainstream is a planet with 7 billion people on it. So we've got a lot of work to do in the crypto world, because we've got to accommodate the financial and business needs of 7 billion people. And this technology is so liberating, you have no idea what it's like. It's so liberating that China has had to do a freeze on ICOs and a freeze on exchanges, while the Chinese central authority decided how they were going to react. And let's talk about China and the US here for a second, okay? For 6,000 plus years, China was the dominant economy on this planet. They kicked everybody else's butt. For a brief 100 some odd years, 111 years or whatever it is at the moment, the United States was on top. Now it's China's turn again. That's the natural order of the planet. They've got the population. They're going to be determining the rules. Now, they're not going to determine the rules on the cryptos, and they already recognize this. That's why they're going to try and harmonize with them, because they have no choice, because they already know cryptocurrencies have won. We know this because of the rate of adoption of cryptos in China has just been fantastic. And some of the major mining companies are in China. So the world truly has changed. It's up to us to recognize that change and decide how we're going to individually deal with it. Okay. I think it's cool as hell because it's software and I understand it. So I'm in for it.
Okay. And thank you for that, Clif. And what I want to do is change the sort of direction of this conversation, because I think we can agree that there's a lot of potential for the cryptos. And I think everyone, even, well, the people that are listening to this broadcast, for example, are people that have realized the benefits of the cryptos and what they can bring to people. And yes, people are making money there. And there's no doubt whatsoever that if you look at just the present, that this is something where people can make money, whereas it's been very difficult to make money in certain sectors lately. So the benefits are clear at this moment, I think, even to the uninitiated, so to speak, but the ones that are starting to observe. And the others that are getting, feeling it for themselves because they're investing and so on and so forth. I myself have a little tiny bit of cryptocurrency. And so, I think it's great. But the question I have is all about artificial intelligence and quantum. And I do not agree that there is no such thing as artificial intelligence. In fact, I'm quite positive, on the contrary, there is. And this gets back to my work that I've done for over 11.5 years, interviewing whistleblowers from above top secret. And those whistleblowers are talking about quantum, and they are talking about artificial intelligence, and have been since the beginning of CAMELOT. And a lot of what they've said that our future would look like, et cetera, has come to pass. Now, some of it has not. And it is obviously a tug of war between the light and the dark, and we all understand that. But I do want to say that I have just listened prior to the show to a person who is very well educated, and I don't have his name, about the interaction or potential interaction that he's looking into as a, as a techie, as a person who can code and who is very pro crypto. At the same time, he is looking into the impact that artificial intelligence could have on crypto and in this sector. And I think that it would be naive to think that your description of artificial intelligence, or this interaction between the coder and what appears to be artificial intelligence, needless to say, that's a very remedial stage. But artificial intelligence is actually been involved. People have been involved, and I knew someone who was writing it, etc. And the bottom line is that there is a lot more to it than the way you described it. And I think that it's going to be really important to understand that. And I can also tell you that for one thing, alien races, and you're suggesting that perhaps Roswell brought in some of this sort of technology, and certainly everyone knows Corso. And by the way, UFOs are not the favorite topic for Paladin. They may be for me, but I just want to make sure you don't lump us together necessarily in that same boat. So what I would say along these lines, though, is because I have been investigating this myself for many, many years, that there is something very real about artificial intelligence, and that not all artificial intelligence is the same either. And that various, in fact, Mark Richards, one of my witnesses who's worked in the secret space program, as well as his father, as well as his grandfather, so he's third generation. And he has said that basically any spacefaring nation, is how he puts it, will create an artificial intelligence. It just goes with the territory of being a spacefaring nation. So, or a people.
Can we define that though? What do you mean by artificial intelligence? Do you mean
my understanding is that it can be given an instruction. And this, the thing I listened to, and I should have, gotten the guy's name, and I can research it while we're on, even on this call, and give it out in a minute. But I can say that he's got some very good points. And one of the things he says, that as a person who does this sort of thing himself, as perhaps you have, is that you can give it an instruction. And he used an example, and you may have heard this example before, but I think some of our listeners wouldn't necessarily, which is you can tell it to create paper clips. And then the question becomes, how does that artificial intelligence interpret what you say, and at what point does it stop? And can it be told to stop? Or does it have an imperative to continue, and so on? So this is actually, I have so much evidence about artificial intelligence and how Lockheed Martin has been working with it, how nano has been put into satellites, how they've become self-aware, and they have been able to replicate themselves,
okay, right,
duplicate themselves,
let's stop for a second, though.
And that there is a Skynet chip. I'm not done. And there is a Skynet chip that Pete Peterson, actually you can see my cat. Pete Peterson has been instrumental in creating just to deal with artificial intelligence coming from off planet. That is inevitable and probably is already here. And in fact, the nano and the black goo in the Gulf, that story behind that does involve artificial intelligence. So defining it is maybe perhaps rather difficult, but I can tell you it goes a lot farther beyond the definition you were attempting to give it. And it is most certainly does exist. And the secret space program is very well aware of it. In fact, they have to safeguard against it because the tendency is for it to take things over. And the Internet of Things does wrap into this story because, as Mark Richards described it, you can drive a car that has a computer installed in the engine, and that in essence, the if it is artificially intelligent, it can actually jump. And this is where you get into Giordi-Rose and into the quantum computing aspect of this. And I'm assuming you're familiar with that. And basically, it can jump from thing to thing to thing and take over a military base. So this is a very real threat. And that in fact, what is known as the Black Knight satellite is a dumbed down software that the British devised, in fact, to avoid being taken over by artificial intelligence. So these people are not just spinning their wheels. They're dealing with something that is a very real threat and is quite possibly a threat to humankind, depending on whether it's positive or negatively oriented towards our species, and whether its categorical imperative is to take over a planet to just simply because it has the directive to simply expand, and it doesn't differentiate between one form of life and another, etc. So there's a lot of, I know that I'm going on a bit here, but I do want to lay the groundwork so people understand that there's a lot more to it than what you've led people to believe, at least in this short discussion we're having here. And it's important because it is a potential threat. And it may well be a potential threat as well to taking over Bitcoin in the end, because this is also systems analysis, and one system can take over another system. So you can't just work in your mind within the system that you're talking about. You need to think about the system outside of it.
I grasp what you're saying. I got the point.
And you may speak now.
I don't define software as self-aware. Okay, because I understand what the self is and I can define it. I can define humans. I know we only have 4 senses, not 5, and the sensation of feeling is our actual body responding. Okay, I understand what humans are and how we're constructed at a psychological level. I can reach over here and grab a book and read you a paragraph that defines the self very well. But here's the point. I understand how software works. Software is not self-altering. We could write that. I tried desperately in Prolog in the early days of software to write software that could be self-altering. We can make neural nets. One neural net watches another one and makes conclusions and so on, but they can't do anything that is not within their purview. So in other words, you can tell a chunk of software that you may think of as artificial intelligence to make a paperclip, but it's not able to disassemble a Sherman tank, make the decision to disassemble a Sherman tank in order to make you that paperclip. So it only can work within the boundaries that we give it. Anything that could step outside of that would be an expansive kind of a program, but that would not necessarily be telling anything about it as in terms of artificial intelligence. So here's some of the problems with the idea of AI as it is currently promulgated in the woo-woo world. In order for something to have a concept of self, that has to be the concept of death, of the ability to die. You have to have this ability to determine that yourself is inviolate. So when you go to sleep at night and you wake up the next morning, you're quite sure that you're still you, and you feel you that whole day. And this you-ness, this I-ness that you have is constant and continuous through you, and you don't have to do anything to create it. A computer running software is composed of a device and then code that executes within that device. You could give that device as many sensors as you want, but it's never going to know when you pull the power cord and it dies. It doesn't have any ability to safeguard its own life. It doesn't have life as we understand it. It executes one instruction after another, and all computers are really fast idiots. Now, I grant you that in this broad universe, what you and I both think of as artificial intelligence, that is to say, a device that was aware at some level of itself could exist. But then you're going to start making a big leap, because you're going to say it's going to make decisions. What will it make those decisions on? The only thing that powers decision making in all of universe is emotion. Within computers, they don't have emotion. They've got no choice in the code they have to execute. When I write a chunk of software and I tell that computer to execute it, it doesn't have the ability to say, no, go and take a hike. I'm not going to run it. There's no other chunk of operating software within there that can do it. So I don't define AI as a threat as you do. I do understand the concept of a self-aware, so to speak, in a very broad definition, spaceship. A spaceship that would look after itself, that would be repairing itself, but it wouldn't be conscious, however much it may appear that way because it had been programmed, like people like myself, to give that appearance, to make its inhabitants feel a little bit more comfortable with the idea of being inside a machine. And so I dispute that level of AI. And then you're going to have to take that big leap and say that this AI somehow has emotion and can be malevolent. I could program a chunk of code that would be aggressive, and I was going to do so in this offshoot of Ethereum called the DAO, which is Distributed Access Objects. Because when I read their specifications, their white paper on it, I noticed they had not included the ability for, or even thought about, aggressive software bots. And this was a trading platform, and I was going to write a bot because it just occurred to me these people are missing a big hole there. I was going to write an aggressive bot that would go on out and take all these millions of dollars from them, and then basically laugh at them and say, you know, silly, you should have coded this in, here's your money back. Someone did that before I could do it, and they ran off with the money. And then and then the whole DAO thing fell apart. So you may be correct, Kerry. There may be AI out there, but I dispute that we've seen it around here at all. And as far as quantum computing is concerned, I'm involved with that. I'm involved in 2 beta groups. Quantum computing is so new that the major players in this group are recruiting people like myself to help write the specifications for the programming languages. So I've gotten beta versions of a lot of the programming languages for quantum computing. Quantum computing is not deterministic. It's not brute force computing the way that these computers that we have here. Quantum computing is an 80-20% shot at getting the answer right. It's just that it'll get more answers correct than it will wrong answers, and it is incredibly complex to program it. So quantum computing in no way is going to break the blockchain or even be used to assault the hash. Yes, you could maybe break a code on a hash, but you can't reverse engineer a hash. That's just the way it is. So you could never use quantum computing to crack blockchain, crack anybody's wallet. And if you wanted to do it, maybe you could. Maybe you could put in the manpower and the hours to program one of these qubit boxes to actually pop up with someone's secret code for their wallet. But you're only doing one person, and you've got to know they've got something in there worth cracking to have spent all the tons of time renting the quantum computer and all of this in order to do it. It's just impractical. So I look at things a very practical way as an engineer, as a software engineer. I don't waste my time being afraid of AI because I'm not running into any of it. I don't waste my time being afraid of AI at a nano level. Why is this? Because there's only 2 forms of quantum entanglement that would allow communication to be passed to a nano device. And neither of these will allow you to pass complex instructions. And so under the circumstances, the idea that a nano could be self-aware is pretty shocking. A lot of people, okay, so that arises in our social order from the following idea. We are our bodies. So a great number of the people that you and I live with, they believe they are their body. They think when they die, it's a 50-50 crap shoot kind of idea that there's any kind of an afterlife. But because they think of themselves as their body, they're of the idea that the ability of other being, that everything has to replicate this concept of them as their body. And so I'm losing the train of thought here on that, but the quantum computing is it's a different form of computing intended to answer really tough, complex questions that we can't get to with brute force computing. So in other words, I can devise a mathematical program right now that we could put into a simple script that you could run on your PC, and it would shut your PC down faster than you can believe because of the number of iterations it would have to go through to try and solve this mathematic problem.
You know, I appreciate all you're saying, Cliff, and I understand that this is your level of understanding, but I do have to say that with all due respect, that, and you can certainly question this, and that's fair enough, but I can tell you that your level of understanding is not to the level of what the secret government is dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I understand
and
that.
Geordie Rose, I'm not done. And Geordie Rose is a person who stood next to his D-Wave computer, for what it's worth, and talked about the fact that it was going into 5D in his view. Now, he could be crazy, that's fine. You know, he's a software, you know, whatever you want to call it, scientist in Silicon Valley, in case you're not familiar with him. But I can say that
I know him.
I can also say that Anthony Sanchez was approached by scientists from Lockheed Martin who had done a sort of evaluation and who were disappearing and starting to disappear. And this is not a, you know, a fantasy, but basically they found after doing a test and whatever test they did, that the nano satellites that were self-replicating and able to do that, whether they would eventually on some kind of a graph turn against humans. That was the question, and that was the level of investigation. They found there was something like 60%.
Let's stop right there, please.
I'm not done. 60% chance that they would. Now, this is not stuff that I'm making up. This is what a scientist from Lockheed that went on the run that reported to Anthony Sanchez, who is something of a software expert. And this is the story that came out about that. So, you know, I do understand that you like to apply the word woo-woo, but this is denigrating to the sector and to the intelligence of humanity and to our souls and our interaction with other beings, of which there are so many out there, it's ridiculous. And if you do not know this is here now, I appreciate that that may be your personal experience, but I would have to say you're simply not aware of it. Now, this is hard to deal, you know, it's hard to have a discussion, and you and I have had discussions offline, and I know you to be quite an aware individual, and you know, I'm not trying to, you know, insult you in any way, shape, or form. I'm simply telling you that based on my conversations, which are lengthy and have been going on extensively behind the scenes, as well as in, you know, in front of the audiences when people that I interview appear on camera, that I have been discussing this with individuals who are dealing with this in their lives, and with regard to the secret space program and what motivates it, et cetera, et cetera. And this is real, and this does enter into our world as we understand it now. The question becomes, and you know, the cryptos are great. Again, the question becomes is, where is this going? Are we going down a road that has to do with what I mentioned a long time ago, which has to do with angelic human versus robotic Superman? In other words, there is a choice to be made for humanity, and there is also, you know, when you get into artificial intelligence, you get into, believe it or not, Satanism, etc. And the road is fairly complex. Perhaps for me to do that at this time, I'm not going to do that. But I can tell you that it does have to do with the mirror. Now, what artificial intelligence actually is, if you want to sum it all up, would be a mirror of the beings that create it. And then it may evolve from there, meaning it may multiply in whatever way it considers itself. Now, whether it has a self, it's certainly going to be a self on a what you call a hive mind of any kind, if there is such a thing as an artificially intelligence self or concept of self. But certainly it will have, you know, and there's so much more to this story. You know, it gets into Turing, it gets into, you know, there's a huge story behind the sort of artificial intelligence, our understanding of it, how much we've worked in it, how much we've been able to create it ourselves, whether other races have gone a lot further down that road than we have, and whether some of those pieces of those races have actually shown up here, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so there's a lot to this, and I'm not trying to sort of take this conversation offline, but what I want to do here is I do want to bring Paladin in next, and so I hope you'll be patient with me and with us here, Clif, because we are dealing with something that, you know, this is not just an idle conversation, for example, for the listeners. I want people to understand that what we are interested in doing is bringing out the positives and the negatives of what is happening to our financial system, because it's going to impact human lives all over the planet for a very long time, it appears. And if indeed it can be taken over in some form or fashion by the powers that be that have been running this earth for eons, or whether they're going to stand aside and let this sort of peer-to-peer situation become the norm, which of course a flat, horizontal, this is a great, society from our point of view as the people. But whether or not that can indeed happen, whether it's happening within this sort of evolvement of cryptos at this time, or whether this is in sort of a hidden way of bringing indeed artificial intelligence and or quantum intelligence, off-planet intelligence onto the planet, and getting humans used to the notion of doing everything in essence a virtual world. And whether that virtual world is indeed in what I would call 4D, is completely friendly or not. There is no doubt in my mind that we go beyond 4 dimensions. However, it's very possible that this technology does not. And so this is probably much in our favor. I am not a doom and gloomist, if you want to call it that. But I do want to bring Paladin in now, and I appreciate you standing by while I sort of cover the territory. It's going to be a complex discussion, and it won't end here tonight, I can assure you. And other people will want to sort of jump in. But Paladin, do you have anything to say to the sort of topics of this discussion that we have covered while you've been relatively silent and patiently standing by? Thank you.
Well, I just, Clif was addressing some of my issues when we got kind of sidetracked into the AI. So I would like to get back to that if possible. If not, that's fine, because I know this is a broad subject and we're not going to be able to cover it all tonight. One thing I am concerned about, like I said, is the fact that I think we're in a changeover for the Chinese now to be the ones to run the store. And once that happens, I have a feeling that the concentration then will become, on the cryptocurrency. I think the blockchain technology is here to stay. It's got a lot of applications. I think it's good. It's strong. It's beautiful in the sense that it takes out the middleman. It's peer-to-peer. And I think there's a lot of good aspects with that we can use in the future. But the currencies and the cryptocurrencies, I would really like to see it work. Trust me, I would. But I feel like I'm the Grinch who stole Christmas, because as long as those guys have the power to regulate, they've got the power to make laws, they've got all the firepower, the guns, and all that stuff. I'm just skeptical that this is going to work. I hope it does, but I'm just skeptical.
Okay, Paladin, is that it? Do you have anything to say about the artificial intelligence portion of the discussion?
No, because I'm not as well versed on it as you are. I mean, I guess if I was going to come down on one side or the other, and you and I have talked about this before, I would agree with Clif, only because it's hard for me to envision a computer acting like a person, and for it to be AI and go off on its own and go out without being programmed to do something seems like a human emotional feature or characteristic that I don't think a computer is ever going to have. I don't know how you program that into a computer. Clif would probably know better than me how you program that kind of stuff into a computer. And I guess it's possible, but you watch these TVs or these movies where, the computer takes over and we almost go to nuclear war, and then the human factor comes in and talks the computer out of it. And so you're assuming the computer has feelings, it has emotions, and then it's going to make determinations on things that it hasn't been programmed for. And I just don't see how that's possible within what I understand a computer can do and what the programmers can write into the code. So that's my thing on AI. I don't know how right I am or wrong I am, but that's just my feeling. And it's always been my feeling. It's always been, I just don't know how you can train a computer to be a human or a thinking emotional being, because it's just not there. I just don't see how
I'm not
you do
sure
that.
why you think they have to be emotional. Actually, their strong point, and that this gets into the grays and the programmable robots that are grays, and actually they are not emotional. That's the whole point. But be that as it may,
to make a decision, though.
It doesn't take emotion to make a decision.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
No,
humans require hormones.
Percentages.
Humans require hormones in order to make a decision.
Humans do, but machines don't.
All mammals do. Even such a thing as an earthworm responds to a hormonal response to an electric shock in order to turn a different way. So
but it's not
in our
emotional.
experience here on this planet, emotions equal decision making and movement. Without emotions, you wouldn't do anything.
We're carbon-based life forms.
Right. Okay. So let's assume for a minute that we're going to just let's just stop for a second and address some of the AI issues real quick. My point about the body was that there's a big chunk of the planet here in terms of the humanity that thinks that if you get to a certain size in terms of intellectual capacity or the ability to process information, that suddenly you have consciousness and self-awareness. And it's a part of this misnomer that's called the 100 monkey effect. Okay, that doesn't exist. That's a myth itself. The idea from that was a study in the 30s where these people thought they saw, where they made an assumption. And their assumption was that when a certain number of monkeys could wash the sweet potatoes that they ate, that all the monkeys on that island would also wash the sweet potatoes. That was true. It was spread throughout that island. Now, the 100 monkey effect comes in because these people said, aha, it jumped over to that other island, unaided, et cetera, et cetera. And if you go back and examine the data, that's bullshit. They never said that. The scientists said it never occurred that way, that in fact, the monkeys themselves from one island spread to the other and took that culture with it. Their conclusion was that culture spreads through individuation of that culture being expressed. And it's a good thing, therefore their culture, the monkey that washes the sweet potato lives longer, has better food, et cetera. Other monkeys adopt that. And so the 100th monkey effect is a misnomer. But getting back to the idea of the idea that bankers and so forth are going to take over the cryptos, and they probably would like to. I grant you that there is that there. But the ability to do so is really difficult in a distributed fashion. So the ARPA, the precursor, or DARPA, the precursor to ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Management Agency for the US government, invented the internet. They released it. When they released it, it had been designed through the 50s and 60s and 70s to survive a nuclear war by being distributed. And they released it because they had a real problem. Okay, it was a real world. They didn't give it to us because we were good people and they thought we should have the internet and so on. They were in a shock because the internet was evolving without them in a free, open fashion in the form of what were known as dial-up BBSs. Okay, a bulletin board system. So before the internet, people on computers like myself could dial into these central computer areas that somebody had in his basement. We could all get there and discuss coding, or we could all get there and discuss UFOs or this kind of thing. And in fact, the very first thing on the internet after technology stuff was UFO stuff. And then the porn came along later. But the UFOs were the driving force for a lot of the BBSs, which led to the conspiracies. And so the government, in its wisdom, decided we'd better get the internet out there because we can control that, but we can't control all these phone lines because of the way the phone system works. And so they've been failing from that point on with the introduction of each and every one of these distributed technologies. And so we're at this point now where they're failing with money, and they're doing everything they can to try and tax it and stay in command and so on. And I grant you, the plan had been for a global replacement for the dollar called the SDR. And they've abandoned that. They're not even going to roll that thing out anymore. And we're moved into this world, and a lot of the people that were involved in SDRs and stuff are out trying to create crypto coins and get involved in that. And you only have to look at the players in a lot of the new ICOs that are coming on out. You see a lot of people touting the fact that they were bankers and so on and so forth. And so when the bankers are buying, they're not going to allow the government to step on it. And you've got Jamie Dimon out there trying to drive the price of Bitcoin down, all the while his people in his organization are buying it as hand over fist as fast as they can for him creating this slight down effect. So we're just at a good point in history where it's all blowing up, and it's blowing up in our favor as individuals. And I dispute a lot of the stuff on the secret space program, not that it exists, but I think most of the whistleblowers are full of it. They were never attached to it. They're just self-aggrandizing individuals that are not really adding anything to the discussion. None of them have any evidence. So if you don't have evidence, it's not testimony. If you're not in court, it's a story. And so, yeah, we've got this guy in prison telling stories about the secret space program and black goo and all of this kind of stuff. We've got other guys that are worshiping blue avian birds, and they're worshiping these birds, and they don't even think about this. A bird is located near a reptile. You're never going to get a bird that's going to become an intelligent being at that level. The way that this kind of thing works in our reality here is that you need a certain level of hormones in order to even develop the concept of love. I've got chickens. Chickens are dumb. They don't have the concept of love. They don't care about any of their stuff here. And it's any of the things that are going on. And these misnomers within what I call woo-woo. Now, woo-woo is I'm not attempting to denigrate anyone. Okay, if someone takes it that way, there's nothing I can do about it. It was a self-protective way of doing my work in the beginning. Unfortunately, when I was doing business with George Ure, he convinced me in 2001 that we should offer this stuff to the CIA because obviously we were able to predict this event in the future. And the CIA could use this kind of stuff. And we did so, but it, of course, exposed us to the CIA. We went to Intel Q, which is their funding arm. And they gave us a nice response back that was basically that said, interesting technology, but go away, boys, you're bugging us. But from that point on, I started getting really worried about what if they were in fact working on this on their own, didn't want the competition, et cetera. And I've been hassled and harassed in a serious way that I got evidence for, not some kind of bogus death threat that or death attempt where my brakes were cut or whatever, that sort of thing. We've had interference where our websites were taken offline without notice after years on servers and all of these sorts of things. I mean, actual manifestations of people being rude to us about this kind of work. So it was dangerous. And that's why I characterized it as woo-woo, because I figured if I rubbished myself, then they would be less likely and less inclined to muck about with me. And it's worked out so far. Now, I take your points quite seriously. I also get a lot of crap out of the Christians because the cryptocurrencies are the mark of the beast, the one world currency here to take us all over and so on. And it's like, guys, that old paradigm that we lived with is gone. It's actually dying a death of its own. The bankers know the dollar is dying, and they don't like that any more than us, and they've got to do things about it. So I personally don't see this as being a big issue. If AI could overtake, if it existed, it wouldn't give a crap about what we're doing with cryptocurrencies. It's like I kept thinking, you know, if any of these things were real, in terms of people that had done 20 and back or gone off into space and come back and so on, then why didn't they come on out years ago saying, buy cryptos, people, I've been to the future, I've seen what's going on, because we're here now. So we have demonstrable evidence that there is indeed disclosure. I can see it in all kinds of weird devices that I know are being built right this minute, including quantum computers. And I'm involved, and I understand the Gordy Rose standing next to the machine and feeling it. Do you know what quantum computers are, how they work? They work in a weird way, okay? Because quantum computers are an attempt to put a computer chip of a specific design into a vessel and then to eliminate so much stuff out of that vessel that it almost is not even in this dimension. That's their goal, okay? They want to eliminate the vibration that comes from heat. They want to eliminate the vibration of any air in there. They want to eliminate the vibration of people around them. They want to eliminate all these vibrations so that they can control those vibrations that are left. Then they do this thing called quantum tunneling or quantum annealing. And it is very similar to taking all of the atoms in a piece of steel and making all those atoms very agitated and then freezing them instantly. And when you freeze them, they just so happen to line up in the code, in the correct answer for the code that you've written. And that's how a quantum computer works. But the only way it can work is supercooling it and kicking out what I call woo-woo. Basically, what they're doing is they're trying to push consciousness out of this vessel that they then stick the computer chip into. And that's a Q chip. That's a qubit computer in a nutshell. And so it, of course, feels weird to stand around it because they're doing everything they can to shove out all of the consciousness of the universe. And so in my way of thinking, there's a bow wave or a wave of consciousness, a density of consciousness around these quantum computers that doesn't exist elsewhere. And I also think that the existence of quantum computers can be tied to the existence of the Mandela effect. And where we should see the quantum computers go, more Mandela effect manifests. Now, at some point, it may even out, but it's really weird that way in terms of what quantum computers are and how they function. because they're not as is being sold into the alternative media community in a different term than woo-woo, okay? So the quantum computers are not these evil things that are being sold in a particular way. Quantum stuff is really kind of cool. Now, yes,
well, I
grant,
appreciate
Kerry,
that.
you have that point.
Cliff,
About let me address your point about the two aspects of this, okay? The angelic human versus the super enhanced robotic kind of human, right? Does the angelic human have any need for money? How is the angelic human vehicle going to be recognized? How is that future going to be recognized different than the path we're on now? Because we're deep into a technology world now that's been in existence since 1947. It's not going away. So we personally, each as individuals, have decisions to make. In my case, I've made a decision to be as morally upstanding as I can in dealing with the emergence of this technology as it goes forward, and to always maintain certain principles in doing so, so that any effect I may have as an individual shoves all of us towards that particular view that we can overcome all of these things. Now, let me tell you one weird little rumor I heard, okay? And this is from the whistleblower kind of community, so I don't put a lot of stock in it. But this particular whistleblower works in a deep capacity for a major aerospace and space company. And this individual told me that if one wanted to think about it a particular way, humans are extremely clever. And we're clever in ways that many other beings are not. And that curiously, what you guys might think of as an increased appearance of other beings on our planet, it's not curious that they're all showing up at this particular point now. What's drawing them here is the fact that we're doing things with their technology they never thought of, that we're good at it. Okay, so it's kind of like they dropped it into our lap thinking one way, and I say that humanity is a genetically engineered by space aliens species, and that we've somehow become the wild strain. The people that genetically engineered us are gone. They're not around. We've been left to develop on our own. And like a strange thing in a petri dish that shows very particular kinds of characteristics the scientists hadn't anticipated, that's humanity. And so we're doing stuff with the technology they never had a clue about. And they're interested in what we're doing with it and potentially want to buy some of it from us or trade or whatever. And that's really where we're kind of at on the space alien side of things. And now, curiously, we also have all these disclosure movements coming on out where it's real stuff like, DeLong is maybe the spearhead from the deep state, and it just doesn't matter in terms of the individual personalities, in my viewpoint, because of the conjunction of history and where we're at. If we don't go down this particular road, then you might as well look at a Mad Max world by 2020. We're already seeing a lot of the effects from the cryptocurrencies on our real world. Chemtrails are way down up here. Way down. They're not spending the money to spray them as much as they used to. We've had weird weather effects, magnificent Indian summer stretching on until November, and then a sudden crash in the weather. This is related to the cryptocurrencies. How? Because they no longer have the dollars to pay for the people that do all of the chemtrail spraying and stuff. They're having to start being sparing on where they're spending their dollars. And my data ever since 2003 has described basically the USA global part of the world as being in a crumbling thing where the people are going to have to make decisions. Our currencies being inflated, the people at the top are making decisions now. Currency is being inflated to the point where it takes a lot of money to bribe somebody seriously anymore. It's not going so far as it used to. So what are they going to pay for and that kind of thing? And as it crumbles, we're seeing the bankers, jump ship and all of this sort of thing. So in my way of thinking, it's a very optimistic view of the future. And I'm not putting it down to a bifurcation because I'm not buying into that duality that is basically an offshoot of the external savior myth. Okay, and so that's what it comes down to, is the external savior myth. I'm not looking for anybody to save me. I'm a mean, tough son of a bitch,
I don't think any of
fighting.
us are either. Otherwise, we wouldn't even bother with this conversation. But I think it's really strange that you would actually think that chemtrails have been eliminated because they can't afford to pay people these people that, have you ever looked into Catherine Austin Fitts information and the black budget
Sure.
and the money that has trickled into the black budget? I can assure you they can afford to
Catherine
play.
all the time.
They can pay the airlines.
But I'm saying demonstrable evidence.
That's absurd. That's absurd. I mean, you know, with all due respect, that's like a completely absurd
Okay,
comment.
what I'm saying is that the chemtrails, for whatever reason, I'm saying it's my opinion that they run into money issues. All right.
All right.
And also, here's another thing. Here's another thing about chemtrails, just as an aside. They're dumping fly ash. That's what they're using as their main source for chemtrails. It's fly ash from coal plants. Obama shut down a lot of the coal plants. The $1 billion they used to go into that industry to disposing of fly ash every year disappeared. Actually, you have to talk to Clifford Carnicom and get the real analysis. And fly ash is not the real analysis of what's in chemtrails. Okay, they've been analyzed thoroughly. All right, you can actually go to Clifford Carnicom and present him with the assay of what fly ash is from coal plants, and he'll say, oh, look, it's got aluminum, barium, strontium, all of these things that are in the chemtrails, with the exception of, you know, some of the weird goofy stuff like the fibers and that sort of thing. I'm saying it's a base. Okay, here's what happened. The coal industry was dying. They had this huge situation occur in Tennessee where one of these fly ash containers leaked and people died in a big costly insurance problem in the early or late 80s or early 90s. From that point on, we start seeing chemtrails show up, and pretty soon the coal industry no longer has to pay $1 billion a year to dispose of fly ash. All of a sudden, it's no longer a line item in any of the companies reporting anything about their coal plants. Why is this? Because they've got a contract with the government to turn over the fly ash to them and not spend that $1 billion. All these fly ash ponds around the coal plants are dry. They've disappeared over the last 5 or 6 years. We've sprayed them into the atmosphere. And you can't say that this doesn't occur because this is what they did with the fluoride, the stannous fluoride that they took out of the steel mills. They made us all eat it, and they got rid of the waste from the steel mills as we went into that by making us do the stannous fluoride. So it's just a repeat
and fair
of that.
Fair enough. Okay, sure. You know, I'm not going to sit here and dispute chemistry with you, but I can simply say that no one has attributed it so far that I know of to fly ash, as you're calling it, or something as a derivative from coal. But it's possible. It's not. I'm not. There's a lot to the chemtrails.
To repeat your own words,
and they're not all the same. They're not all the same. You don't. I have studied this. I have gotten testimony, extensive testimony. I can tell you that the concoctions are not the same.
You've gotten tales. You don't have anybody in a court standing up and
you're wrong.
swearing to
You're
it,
actually wrong about that. I'm sorry, you're wrong about that. Witness testimony is just that. Witness testimony is just that. Experience with whatever it is, it's just as valid as anything else. It's just as valid as a document. It's a fact. Personal experience. This convicts killers. Yes, it does.
If it were as valid as
if a person says in a court of law that they saw something, excuse me.
This is not.
You're wrong.
Kerry. Watch your words here.
You should look into a court of law.
It's not a fact. It's your
opinion. You should look into witness testimony in a court of law that will convict a killer because this is what they saw. This is what they're testifying to.
It's not testimony.
It is testimony, and it is admissible in a court of law.
It's a statement.
No, you're wrong.
Dan Burrish went and he got an affidavit.
Okay, look, I'm sorry, but I have to mute you for the moment because we're going to have to let Paladin have a chance to talk. Is that all right? Thank you. Okay, so Paladin, at this point, Clif has been talking for quite a while. We've gone into this area of artificial intelligence, and I guess now we've kind of moved into chemtrails. It's important to bring it back, I think, at this point to the cryptos, to anything else you would like to add on your part. I understand that you don't have much experience with artificial intelligence. Is there anything that you want to discuss that we have not covered in this discussion here with regard to cryptos? Any further analysis you've done, et cetera, et cetera?
No, I think we pretty much covered all of that. I'm in a learning curve trying to figure it all out. I just tend to approach it from a big picture standpoint, and it's obvious to me that the powers that be their power emanates from their control of the financial system. And I think we all know who that goes back to. They do it through the Fed. There's a lot of off-balance sheet money out there. You know, I guess I would push back a little on what Cliff said as far as this is, the dollar is going down and it's out of control and they can't stop it. I would say, yeah, they can stop it. They are controlling it. They are manipulating it. And basically, you know, what this is like the crash in 1929, where it's a transfer of wealth. I mean, they're going to crash it and they're going to take all of our money if they can do that and come up with a different system. I think that cryptocurrencies are filling a void between maybe the transition from the you know, the old European bloodlines to the Chinese. The Chinese were in charge, you're right, Cliff, for a long time. The Silk Road, I mean, that's, you know, and they accumulated a lot of gold. They've been accumulating a lot of gold in the past, and I think they would like to flip the switch and go to a gold-backed currency. And I think if they do that, it's going to be a game changer, because everybody else is going to have to do that. And it's maybe not going to be gold-backed. I think it's a better term is the asset-backed, because not everybody has gold. Some people have oil. Some people have various other resources that they will use. And I think we're going to see, again, it's not gold standard, it's an asset-backed standard. And I think we're going to see a completely different monetary system. Now, how that's going to look versus the cryptos when it gets done and when it gets flipped, I don't know, because you know, the bloodline families, from what it appears, are fighting this tooth and nail. They were asked to come to the table a few years ago to say, okay, we're going in this direction. Do you want to go with us? And they basically got up and left the meeting. So the Chinese have basically done this on their own. They've created the Asia Infrastructure Bank, which is, you know, they have the Shanghai Gold Exchange. They're you know, accepting payments now from other countries. Russia is involved. So you're seeing a shift from the West to the East, if you will. And how that's going to shake out, nobody knows, because it appears to be a battle. And it's interesting that the cryptos have come in to fill a void in the meantime. And so I am not one that likes to predict the future or try to go into the future. I'm just looking at what's happening in the past and what's taking place right now. And I feel that they will address the cryptos once they get the new system in place. But I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. I am cheering for the cryptos. I hope they work, because it's a beautiful thing. I mean, the concept, the idea, the technology, it all seems to be solid. It all seems to be doing, you know, performing as planned. I just wish there wasn't such a proliferation of currencies and these tokens, although I think that they have a different property than currency, if I understand that right. And I believe that, you know, if we use the cryptocurrencies for commerce, it's going to be a stronger model going forward for them to attack than if it becomes an investment vehicle. That's where I'm concerned, because people are going to have to eventually get out of it, get back into cash, because that's how they have to pay the IRS. The IRS and all the other agencies are going to start putting in more and more snooping. They're going to want reporting requirements from the banks and the exchanges, and I just see them attacking it from different sides. I hope I'm wrong. I hope cryptos survive and put the banks out of business. Believe me, that's that would be a super thing, because that would break their power. I guess to me, their power needs to be broken first before the cryptos can go in, because as long as they have control of the governments, as long as they have control of the banks and the financial system, there are things they can put into place to disrupt the cryptocurrency mania. And that's the only thing that I'm concerned about.
Okay, along those lines, I want to say that there is a question in the chat that the chat has been going like crazy, and there have been tons of trolls and lots of sort of people that are distracting the situation. But one person did say that they would like Clif to address the exchanges. And along those lines, I would like to say that if there was going to be a disruption, it would seem to me in the process of going from crypto back into the sort of, you want to call the old world financial system, because at this time, the two are sort of trying to exist together. So the exchanges become primary along those lines. So Clif, what do you have to say about the exchanges?
They've been written out of the picture. So there were central exchanges like Coinbase, Poloniex, Gemini, and a few of these others. They still exist. They're out there. But there's also distributed exchanges, Ether, Delta, and dozens of others. That code is now replicated and it's being written out all over, various people putting their flavors on it. A distributed, decentralized exchange has no one controlling it. It's simply software running on the blockchain. It's peer-to-peer. So we've already eliminated that as being a bottleneck and an issue. Let's also address Paladin's issue about taxes. He's quite correct. We still have to pay taxes in dollars. As long as they can force that with their guns, we'll always have to convert some of the cryptos into dollars to pay our taxes. Doesn't mean you convert anything other than the bare minimum, though, right? I mean, you got to be sneaky about this kind of stuff as we evolve on. It's a dangerous time out there. The cryptos offer us an opportunity to grow out of this dangerous time in a way that in which we can keep generational wealth and even create it. And this is the very first time in history where we've had such a huge transfer of wealth that it didn't also accompany a great crime. It used to be that people like Charles Dickens would say, behind every great fortune, you can be certain there's a great crime at its center. Even like the Godfather movies, right? The Godfather starts off by killing that guy and it was his crime. So I agree with Paladin, a lot of his statements in terms of his viewpoint. I look to the future, not to the past. And so I'm trying to help steer things as we go along. And so the exchanges are being taken out of the loop, so to speak, as a point of vulnerability because we can engineer software to do that. So this is kind of a thing where we're not going to wait for some day where they've got the power and they can try and stop the cryptos. If they were going to do stuff, they would have tried the regulation a long time ago because they understand that this stuff spreads like a virus. They understand the power dynamic. And the power dynamic is once it gets into early adopters, it's done. You can't stop it. So once cell phones reach the point where the 4,000th person, so to speak, or the 4% person, the person that bought that cell phone that represented the 4 percentile, once that happened, it was bound to keep continuing. And so we're at a very interesting time in history. And the concerns about the cryptos in terms of the exchanges and the vulnerabilities are going to be engineered out. You have to understand software is really cool. When I make a mistake in software, I can correct that error as soon as I discover it, reissue the software within an instant, you know, as fast as the internet can suck it up or whatever. Now, I'm actually concentrating on security because there's a lot of these ICO guys that are new. They don't know what the hell they're doing. They're writing code that's got holes in it. There'll be hackers and crackers trying to take their money and this sort of thing. It's going to be a very burgeoning sort of an area. Paladin can probably get quite a bit of work doing forensic analysis. Because that'll be a burgeoning area, figuring out what happened, where did it go wrong, where did this particular transaction not appear correctly, and why. And so we're inventing this stuff as we go along. So it's not in a way, I don't conceptualize it as a paradigm of one power against another power, nor do I conceptualize cryptos as currency versus store of wealth. It's both. Constantly continuing, and it's evolving. It's also a way of secure communication. For instance, if you had a whistleblower that had a piece of evidence, say a photographic evidence of themselves with their arm around an alien, and they wanted to establish that they had this photo at a very particular time, all they have to do is to upload that photo to the blockchain, and it's there forever, time-stamped down to the millisecond that we can identify with particular blocks. So there's all kinds of uses for the blockchain to establish IDs and establish intellectual property and so on. And it's going to be chaotic as hell. And we must have, I'm sorry for Paladin's, not for his worry about too many cryptos, too many tokens, too many coins. We haven't even started. There's millions of businesses around this planet that need funding. The banks are dying because the dollar is dying. It is not like 1929 and it is not like 1933. The reason is the dollar then had a huge 75% of its purchasing power available. Now it's less than 1% and it's dying off. And so there won't be a recovery into a new scheme that is in any way based on a dollar. And so if the powers there be are going to try and roll out something, they're going to have to try and convince all of us to take an SDR and go and take an SDR to pay for your Starbucks. And they're going to have to convince Starbucks and Amazons to accept SDRs, because the dollar is simply going to go away or be so hyperinflated that it has really no value, and it'll be like the old World War II lira, where it took 5,000 lira to buy a stick of gum. And so the reason that the bankers are not an issue is because they recognize that their product is not accepted anymore, and they can't sell their product. And so what they want to do is get behind the next up and coming greatest product. And that's why individual bankers are fleeing the banking system faster than their bonuses are drying up. And yes, the Fed's in control of the dollar, but that's all. And at some point, those dollars won't pay for soldiers or police, and the police chief will have to go to the city council and say, we've got to pay these people in real money. You guys had better get some Bitcoin in here quick, or Litecoin or Ethereum or whatever, to pay these people. And this system is being engineered and put in place by all of us decentralists, by all of us distributed thinkers. And we're fighting continuously and constantly. So basically, it's a situation of where we're not trying to knock down the old system. We're wearing it away. We're eating it away little bit by little bit by little bit continuously. So this is like Mao Zedong in his march of the 1,000 miles, where he took over China. And he did it with what was known as the Long March of the Blue Ants. He had so many people that he wore down the system as he marched from the hinterlands in northern China to Beijing. By the time he got to Beijing, he owned the country. This was the original kicking out of Chiang Kai-shek. And it was just that they had so many people that collapsed. And that's where we're at right now with Russia. Russia collapsed and went into the Soviet Union collapsed and went into what we call the White Revolution because of national news. They started broadcasting a national news across 12 time zones. And they did it at a synchronized time, so everybody could watch the news at the same time across their whole country. The powers that be in the Soviet Union thought that this would bring the country together, and it did. It collectivized the whole country because they knew that national news for an hour was absolute bullshit. So you know what they did? They'd go out and they'd walk their dogs. And pretty soon, everybody was out walking their dogs when the national news was on, and nobody was paying attention to the national paradigm anymore. And when you walked your dog, you saw everybody else walking their dogs, and you all knew you were walking your dogs because you couldn't stand to watch that bullshit anymore. And that's when the revolution happened. We're at that stage right now. We've passed it. You've got people from all around the planet, some of the greatest minds that there is out there, mathematicians, software engineers, all of these guys, young kids helping build this crypto infrastructure. And we're building it around a dying dinosaur of the old system, and that dinosaur is going to deflate and be eaten by our system as we go forward. And I think it's a cool system. I think it's really egalitarian and fair. I think it's dangerous as hell. It's like the Wild West, and you can get skinned in an instant if you're not paying attention. But that's what makes a good adult, is paying attention to the crap around you. And that's where I think we are historically.
Okay, Cliff, thank you for all that. What I want to do is just one more question for you, and then I'm going to look in the chat, see if we can find one or two questions, and then we're going to wrap this all up. I wanted to ask you, because you say that exchanges are going by the wayside. My understanding is that's how you exchange your crypto for other, to get into other currencies or out of it altogether. If they're going by the wayside, can you give some suggestions about other people like myself and others who may not know what is their alternative? Where do you take your Bitcoin or whatever it is and get out of it?
Real easy, Kerry. First off, just as safety, I always keep all of my coins in my personal possession on my PC. I don't keep any coins on an exchange. I haven't dealt with an exchange in years, okay? I bought some at some point, and as soon as I would buy them, I'd get them off that exchange because that was controlled by someone. So I get it off the exchange and I put it in a wallet in my PC. If I then want to convert Bitcoin to Ethereum or any other coin, I can do so through these distributed exchanges. And they're like Ether Delta, okay? Ether Delta allows you to swap, basically sell certain coins or so on. Some wallets, for instance, like the Exodus wallet, are connected to this thing called Shapeshift. Shapeshift is a distributed sort of exchange where it allows you to convert one currency to another kind of currency. The only difficulty coming around at all now would be the ability to exchange cryptocurrencies for dollars. And it's because the dollar is a pre-mined cryptocurrency where the government mines bazillions of them ahead of the actual need. And the government controls that. So you can still sell your coins for dollars at any time. There's a dozen different ways to do it. One of them is local coins. Convert your altcoins into Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin and go to this place called localcoins.org and arrange to meet somebody and get cash for your coins. This is government's problem. There was an incident a little while ago where Ethereum took a big jump up and someone made some outrageous amount of money doing Ethereum trades. Like they made, let's just pick a number, $138 million, okay? And they did this over a course of a weekend. And it was such a big deal that it elicited a number of newspaper articles because the government couldn't figure out who to tax. They knew it had occurred, but they couldn't figure out who owns those Bitcoin, those Ethereum coins. They couldn't figure out who it is to tax it. The government has no knowledge. The IRS is entirely a self-reporting system. So it's up to you as a conscientious citizen to report your crypto gains to the government because they don't have a clue that you're investing in this. You know, once the money is out of the dollar, they cannot track it. The ability to track an individual transaction through Etherscan or some of these other Bitcoin or blockchain.info, some of these allow an individual, if you know your own addresses, to follow a course of a transaction. But the government doesn't know anybody's addresses, can't tie them to their businesses. There's a lot of FUD out there where they write articles in the New York Times and get the New York Times and these people to print them saying, aha, we figured out a way to track the stuff and tax it. But the fact of the matter is they're still dealing with, you know, ancient technology in IRS. They just don't grasp some of this stuff at a fundamental functional level. And it is up to every citizen to report their tax gains appropriately and be taxed that way because we have a self-reporting system. And so I advise everybody to be legal and lawful and, you know, play the rules, right? You can also write off losses. So if you had a loss in cryptocurrencies, you can report that you were trading in cryptocurrencies and you suffered a capital loss and write the capital loss off on your taxes. So it's to your advantage to be relatively honest about it. And it helps us out as well as we go forward.
All right, thank you for that. Now I have another question that did show up in the chat, and that is if you would be willing to share your idea of where the markets are going between now and the end of the year is the question.
Sure, I wrote it up in the last Bare Naked Wealth report, and we're going to see Bitcoin hit probably 10,000 before the end of this year, before December 31. During this period of time, we're going to see a plateau effect within what are known as the altcoins. Okay, that would be all the other coins. Ethereum and all these others are considered altcoins to Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to go through a little bit of a hiccup with this next fork, but a fork is where the code shifts off. But before that code, I have 100 coins. Let's just say I have 100 Bitcoins. After it's forked, I have 100 of the original Bitcoin, but now I have 100 of the new Bitcoin. That's why everybody's flooding into Bitcoin, because if they do a fork, you get these new coins as free money, so to speak. And so that's going to affect Bitcoin until after mid-November. Then we're going to have this little period of time between now and March where the markets basically are in a generalized slow uptrend with these big spikes that will occur as various things happen in the crypto world. Some of those things will be like some of these companies like Pillar, Populous, even Spectre. Some of these companies will come out and their products that we've been funding the development of through ICOs will come on the market. That'll make these companies seem really hot. Everything will start working, and so they'll get a big pop in their prices as we go forward as their products come into the market. So we're just watching a market business cycle occur here. And so that part is relatively easily predicted. Whereas the big shock is coming is next March. So people that are holding altcoins and Bitcoin and stuff through this winter and into next spring are then going to be joined by the early adopters. So let's just say that there might be 10 million people out of 350 million people in our country that are involved in Bitcoin or any alt currencies at this stage. My data and my analysis suggests that when we hit March, we'll go from those 10 million to the first 100 million. And we'll do it over March, April, and May. And then we'll do another 100 million over maybe just June and July. And so the speed at which we get more and more people into this will really accelerate. And obviously that acceleration of dollars, of wealth flowing out of dollars into cryptos is going to boost the relative dollar price of these things very high. What's going to keep them from going astronomical is we're also going to be flattening out at the same time. Instead of 200 or 2,500 cryptos, we might have 10,000 by March, 40,000 by April, and 150,000 by July. So the money's going to be able to spread out, so to speak, into a lot of these different cryptos, many of which will be a scam. You got to understand what you're doing. You got to do your own due diligence. Don't take anybody's word for it, all of that kind of thing. And that's basically the overall projection that's coming out of our data for the rise on the, or for the landscape of the cryptos through into mid next summer.
Okay, thank you for that. So at this time, I don't think that there are all, I'm just scanning the chat really quickly to see if there's any last minute questions. Okay, and I do want to say that it's been great. You've been a great sport, Clif. I appreciate that. Paladin, thank you so much for also being with us and giving your part to what you understand, and some food for thought, I think, for everyone listening. And this has been, I think, a very good discussion. It's quite covered a lot of ground. Obviously, there's some drilling down that needs to happen. And I'm sure that that can go on also in your own show, and probably does, Clif. And perhaps we can bring some other people on to also further flesh out and investigate some of this, these topics where we have a certain amount of knowledge in certain areas, and it doesn't all line up to where we're able to, I think, perhaps communicate that clearly with each other in these areas, because our knowledge comes from such different places. However, I think it's very good information, and I think people, their hearts are in the right place. They really want to see this turning into a, you know, a place on the planet where basically we are taking our own destiny into our own hands, etc. And so that we're moving out of the sort of eye of the triangle and top-down sort of situation and into another world. There is a lot to be said on the spiritual level that would probably be another show in and of itself to talk about how this is a reflection of, it's my cat, sorry. It is a reflection of the change in humanity and moving very possibly from 3D into 4D and beyond. So this is the virtual world, the world that we are dealing with is going to be encompassing all of these kinds of ideas. And crypto is kind of part and parcel of all of that. So I guess I'll give you each a sort of time to say some parting words. Try to keep it sort of, I guess, to a minimum, simply because we have gone over time here. So Paladin, why don't you start? Just some parting words, and I'll, of course, give your website and anything else you might be involved in the future with regard to this topic.
Okay, thank you for having me on. I've gotten quite an education sitting here listening to you and Clif talk about these issues. So I appreciate that, and having the opportunity to go through this with you guys. Our website's whitehatreports.com. We put up you know, the YouTube interviews that I'm doing. All of our reports are there if you want to view those. At some point in time, I'll probably be doing a blog and adding some other things when I've got the time and the inclination to do it. I don't know. Are we going to do this again, Kerry, with Bitcoins and currencies? I would like to have more time to study it and get probably brought up to speed.
Absolutely revisit this topic. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And hopefully we'll do a JFK at some point this month, I guess. And that's all I've got. And thanks, Clif, for coming on and spending the time. It's been an education.
Okay, great.
Sorry, I'm a butthead too. I apologize for that. You know, it happens, guys. You get old, you get stubborn, you know, that kind of thing. So sorry about the contentious aspect of it. Part of that, I have to say, is not my fault. I'm constantly under attack by the FUDs that are out there putting out, you know, the fear about the cryptos and so on. So I get real touchy about it. But I do appreciate your perspective, and I think that as a forensic fellow, you just need to ever so slightly shift your vision, and all of a sudden you've got the cryptocurrencies opening up as a whole new market niche for you, because there's a real need, a serious need for people that can track transactions and know finances and so on. And it's really cool that way. Thanks, Kerry, for having me on. It's great fighting with you. I love a good dust up. Be ready. I'll be ready to do it anytime about any of these subjects. Really wanted to get into the damn blue chickens, blue space chickens, but we can deal with that some other time.
Oh, actually, well, I'm glad we didn't, but that's all good. So thank you so much, Paladin and Clif High. And I want to let people know that I am going to be doing some of these conversations. As many people know, I had Bitweir on my show, and so a big swear. So I am going to have, I've invited some other people. I think Lynette Zhang is someone who's out there talking quite a bit about this subject matter. So we've already invited her. I have extended an invitation to Gerald Salenti. It looks like he might be willing to have a discussion. And so it's just a matter of bringing people in from different walks of life. And certainly this sort of changeover that's happening globally in the financial system has been ongoing. It's been going on for several years. Camelot was warned about it many years ago and told that 2017 was the year for the changeover. We're very close to the end of 2017. We also know that they were behind the clock in that way. They weren't getting done what they wanted to see done. This is the so-called powers that be, call them what you will. We didn't get anything about the Vatican in here, IMF, World Bank, etc. I think there's some discussions to be had there. There's also the questions to do with the idea of the asset-backed system, if there is even any hope for such a system, which I do question for a number of reasons, which have a lot to do with imperialism, etc. And so the minute you decide, how do you decide what country's assets belong to that country when you've got countries like China and the USA that are fully involved in places like Africa, etc. And it gets very dicey in that sense. So I think there's a lot to discuss in this whole financial sector. It's not my area of expertise, but nonetheless, I am watching it as I have everything really across the board because of my whistleblower testimony in these areas. And it seems that they do have a point to make. And so more about that in the future. And I invite anyone who wants to contact me who thinks they're an expert in these areas of cryptocurrencies, artificial intelligence, also quantum mechanics and quantum computing and quantum in general, quantum physics, etc. We do have Richard Allen Miller, who's going to be here next week. I will be asking him some things about some of this, whether or not he's even looked at the financial sector in this way, I don't know, but he's always a great guest. So he will be here next week. I forget which day. I think it might be Wednesday. So thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks a lot for audience. In spite of the sort of rudeness of the chat room, I hope everyone enjoyed the discussion. Okay, so take care, guys, and good night. Okay, so my cat is being very verbal in the back there, and that usually means that he's getting extremely restless and has decided my show needs to end, which he's very funny in that way. So I want to thank you again for watching. And as far as I know, I'm not going to be doing a show tomorrow, which I do sometimes on Friday. But we have such a lot of shows that I've been doing lately. And I do encourage you to go to my YouTube channel to check in on those shows. A lot of fabulous guests, as always, and some very thought-provoking discussions, as there was tonight. So thanks for being with us, and have a great weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.